All right, so we're going to walk through a case study of a listen, sort, empower that we recently did with a group, just to kind of give you an in-the-room experience of what one of the LSE sessions might look and feel like. So this team brought us in specifically because they already had a kind of problem statement. They wanted to focus on improving cross-departmental collaboration. Anka served as the facilitator, and I took the role of the scribe. So I was kind of documenting those highlights and some of the process itself. And as you'll see, we did use sticky notes and had both individual time for people to write down their own thoughts, as well as then group time where everyone worked with those ideas. There were 8 participants. One of them was the team leader. So this team leader chose to sit as a participant and allow us, Anka, to facilitate. We had one facilitator, one scribe, and then lots of sticky notes, poster paper up on the wall, and pins for people to use. This is kind of just a mock-up of what the room looked like. So it was one big, actually, sorry, in the real example, there were 2 smaller tables that people were clustered around, but you could see this could work with one large table as well. And everyone was kind of facing or oriented towards a place where we could put the poster papers, and Anka kind of stood up next to those for the majority of the session, and I sat kind of to the side and moved around that way as well. And then this took about 3 hours. So this was an integrated session. There was the listen, sort, and empower all within kind of a morning before lunch, essentially.
So we started with,
go ahead, friend.
We started with the listen part of listen, sort, and power. And we invited the group of 8 to sit comfortably. We introduced everything that they were going to be using. We ensured that, again, there was plenty of space for people to do things and move around and put stuff. And we kicked it off by me asking first, what's working well with cross-department collaboration? And then what's most frustrating about working with other departments? So what folks did first, as we guided them, is write down their responses on sticky notes for themselves, 1 thought per sticky note, both on what's working well and what's frustrating. Once we gave them time to do that, then we asked them one by one to stand up and read their sticky notes aloud to the group. And as they were reading them aloud, they would put them on the large board that we were using. So by the end of everyone reading, the board was filled with sticky notes, things that they had shared.
And I remember typically people being kind of yes-awing and, oh, you're right, that's one too, and kind of bouncing off of each other as they were reading.
Yes. So once everyone had a chance to share and all the sticky notes were up there, we asked the whole group to come on back up to the board and gave them time to cluster the sticky notes, identifying common themes and reoccurring issues or things that came up. Pebbles, as you know, have been referred to. And we just gave them time. We stepped back and they took time coming up with, as the image shows, kind of these clustering of things. And Carrie being the scribe, once those themes emerged, we made a very specific list of what those circles or clusters were. For this group, it was unclear roles in shared projects, delayed feedback loops, inconsistent meeting schedules, IT system limitations, lack of training for new collaborative tools, limited access to necessary data, and conflicting priorities. Those were kind of the big emerging pebbles or boulders, either or, that came up for this group.
And so then we took just a brief pause while everybody, a couple people ran to the restroom kind of thing. And then we came back for the second part, which was the sort. And so we took 2 pieces of poster paper, actually kind of right next to each other, and drew the lo-fi circles. So the local areas or local opportunities for improvement, yours overlapping with theirs, and just had that up there on the poster paper, and then taking those items from the clusters the pebbles and the boulders, we asked the participants to kind of come up and place where they thought those items live in the lo-fi circles. And so here's, as you can see, some were clearly the teams to deal with, some were outside of the team's agency or sphere of influence, and then a couple were within that shared space.
And as a facilitator, the main two questions I asked for them to prompt this was, who has control of this opportunity, or who could make a solution for this happen? Not come up with a solution, but actually implement it, put it into action, approve it, fund it, any of that.
And then as the scribe, so as I was listening, we were specifically looking for those areas of the yours and the shared before we moved on, excuse me, to the second portion of the sort exercise, which is the 2x2 impact and feasibility matrix. And again, we just drew this with the axes of impact and feasibility on a sheet of poster paper. So you could see the 4 quadrants, low to high, and taking the ones that were in the yours and the shared areas of responsibility, we then invited the participants to think through what is the impact and the feasibility of the items in those 2 areas of the circle. And so this was kind of how that, and this was, remind me, Anka, this was more of a facilitated discussion. They stayed seated, and between you and I prompting and asking questions, we were kind of putting things on that matrix.
Yes, so we took it one by one, starting with unclear roles in shared project, and asked the group, where do we think this might go on impact? Is it low or high impact? And the folks would say something. And what about feasibility? Low or high feasibility? And they would say something. And based off of those 2, we would put it in the quadrant. And sometimes there was a little back and forth when someone said, oh, I think it's low, and someone said, I think it's high. And they had a discussion about, you know, what their thoughts were and why they said that. And everyone after that discussion came up to a conclusion like, oh yeah, we can put it as high, or oh yeah, that's definitely low, in the back and forth. So we did take it one by one, going down this list of 5 that we had narrowed from the first sort activity.
And I remember, yeah, it wasn't until sometimes people saw 2 next to each other and were able to compare, oh, well, in relation to each other, this one is actually higher impact or lower impact. And so then we came to, of the 5 from the lo-fi circles, these 3 were identified by the group members as kind of living in the highest feasibility area of the matrix. One of them was in a lower impact, but remember, these were the group's thoughts around which of these could be moved forward. And so even though it's lower impact, lower impact, it's still highly feasible and should still be pursued by the group.
So again, we took a break. We like to take a break at the top of every hour or in each of these kind of big buckets of work. And we came back with just the 3 that emerged from the impact feasibility. And this is where we told participants that now their brains are already probably thinking of specific solutions or ideas to those 3 emerging opportunities. And we gave them specifically, I said, take 5 minutes, come up with as many actionable and tangible ideas for these 3 opportunities that your brain can come up with. We asked them to do 1 per sticky note. Specifically, how might we do these things? What are some ways that we could mobilize, get to these things? What does it look like in action? Trying to get them out of kind of blue sky thinking and into tangible things that we could do. And so they spent time writing ideas, 1 idea per sticky note, rapid fire. Then, similar to in the listen section, we invited participants to come up one at a time, share their ideas with the group, and put them on the board. There are many ideas. Some came with like a tiny stack and prefaced, this is going to take a while. I have lots of ideas, which was so great to see.
So
So
lovely.
once everyone had a chance to share their ideas out loud, they began to hear that there are a lot of similarities around their ideas. And so naturally, they already were inclined to, okay, we want to get up, we want to cluster. This idea is kind of like this idea, or this idea is part one, and this idea is part two. Or if we can combine these two ideas together, it makes a mega idea. So the energy was high here. And so they had time to come up to the board, cluster, and they actually found four big ideas that they were very excited about. One was to create a roles and responsibility template for all projects. Two was to establish a monthly collaboration day with specific set meeting times. Three was to launch a monthly tool training Thursday for peer-led training. And then fourth was to implement a 48-hour response rules for cross-departmental feedback. So once we saw those four big ideas come up, we had already pre-drew this grid. So we put it up as a poster. And we asked them to one by one think of these ideas and specifically asked, let's say, creating roles and responsibilities template. Who wants to take responsibility for this idea? What are the natural next steps to move this forward? What due date might you give yourself to accomplish this? Of course, giving themselves grace, knowing that they have a regular job and workload that they have to manage as well. And then what does success look like? How are you going to know you've accomplished this thing? And Carrie was taking notes as I was prompting this. And folks began to raise their hands. Sarah, we made up this name for this for this example, just to keep them
Call her
anonymous,
Sarah.
but we'll call her Sarah. Sarah raised her hand, said, I can do this. The first step would be to draft this template and schedule a kickoff and conduct a midpoint check, and gave times for herself and measures of success. And folks began to chime in and say, oh yeah, this could be a thing. Oh, and you could do this. And some folks even said, I want to help with that. And we captured that. But we went down the row of ideas and did this for each idea. So the grid could be fully complete. So we know who's taking responsibility, what those next steps might be, not all of the steps, but just the next natural steps, what the due date is, and the measure of success, telling them that we're going to share all of this out with them after, because we're going to take a picture and digitize it and give it to them, which is what we did.
Yes. So there's a few observations we had and just some reflections on this. One of them is that neither Anka nor myself were the leader of this team, right? We were outsiders. Anka was the facilitator and I was the scribe. The team leader was very intentional about wanting to be a participant. A couple of times the team directed questions to that person, just, hey, would this even be feasible? Could we carve out time, kind of thing? And when they were directly asked, they responded, but otherwise they just wanted to be a participant. So, one thing to consider is if you are the team leader and you just really want to participate, you've got ideas that you want to help solve for, maybe ask if a fellow team member or someone from another department could be the facilitator for you so that you can just be embodied and be in the moment and be a participant instead of having to be the facilitator. Anka, do you want to take this one?
Yes. So because of our co-op, we were able to both fill the role of scribe and facilitator. Carrie was the scribe, I was the facilitator, which was fantastic. But we know that not all of you will have that ability and capability. So just want to kind of make you aware that you might have different hats and roles at the same time, facilitating an LSE session, trying to scribe and take notes, and being the team leader as well. So our only suggestion is, if possible, have someone to help as a scribe if you find yourself as a team leader and as a facilitator, because it can be a lot to do. And it's so nice to have extra help there, especially a scribe that can hear what people are saying, write it down, and you can just focus on facilitating and listening.
Absolutely. I also want to point out that Anka was really careful in how she framed the questions. So especially when people started sharing ideas or when they were talking through the pebbles and the boulders in their path, there was never any, judgment of something or analysis of something. All of the analysis is built into the sort and empower exercise, right? So we don't need to pass judgment on someone's experience. That is their experience. And so just kind of as you are facilitating this, remember that it's the role of the facilitator to kind of be non-biased, non-judgmental. You are listening and opening the space to allow people to share, and those are their experiences. So just something to kind of keep in mind about psychological safety and helping create that environment for people.
I will say that for that, as a facilitator, one of the hardest things for myself was in that session, hearing people coming up with ideas when I had my own ideas based off of what I heard their challenges being. And in my mind, I was like, but what if you try this? And what if you try this? But I knew that I couldn't do that because I'm not part of the team. And it's not my role to do that, but just knowing that it could happen as you're facilitating, because it does happen to me all the time.
Yeah. Well, especially if you're also the team leader, right? You have your own ideas, and maybe that's a time for you to say, for just a minute, I'm going to chime in as the team leader now. I think we could also do X, Y, or Z. What are you all's thoughts on that? Like, you might need to be explicit about you're taking off the facilitator hat for a minute and putting on the team leader hat for a moment to kind of contribute your own ideas. But that is it's a tightrope to walk too, right? Because you don't want your ideas to stifle somebody else's ideas because you're the team leader. So just something to be aware of.
And then we always use sticky notes. So you've seen it kind of through our walkthrough of this case study. It's our preferred method of getting people's input. And even in this session, multiple participants expressed that they loved using the sticky notes that help them be more concise with what they wanted to say, help them literally see their pebbles on paper or their ideas on paper. And then one particular participant said that she really was uncomfortable talking about a couple of things, especially around the frustrations around collaborating with cross departments. And that writing it on a sticky note, she was really pleasantly surprised to see that others were putting the same thing on there, and that she would have been afraid to say it out loud. She said this to us after. She would have been afraid to say it out loud versus putting it on a sticky note, and just putting it up there made her a lot more comfortable and safe in expressing those pebbles and boulders, as it felt to her, of things that were not working well with collaborating with others. So if you want to try using sticky notes because of either power differences or sensitive topics, or you have more extroverted people and some introverted people that might not feel comfortable speaking up, sticky notes are a really good neutralizer and elicits a lot of really fantastic input. So just want to put that out there.
So that's our walkthrough of the LSE that we ran. Hopefully it gives you a little bit more perspective